Dominic Vance threw divorce papers in my face the night his company reached a billion-dollar valuation. He sneered that I was too plain for his new life while clutching his young mistress like a trophy. He believes he is the king of New York now. He has no idea that a crumpled piece of paper he signed 10 years ago is actually a blade against his throat. He is not a king, just a placeholder. My name is Valerie Sterling, but tonight, I was nothing more than a stain on the pristine image of the new American dream. The air in the penthouse on the 90th floor of the Hudson Yards Tower smelled of expensive champagne and raw ambition. It was a scent I knew well, though tonight it turned my stomach. Viridian, the tech company my husband founded, had just closed its first day on the NASDAQ with numbers that defied gravity. Dominic Vance stood in the center of the room, a glass of vintage crystal raised high, basking in the adoration of the sharks and vultures of Wall Street. They patted his back and laughed too loudly at his jokes, feeding an ego that had already outgrown the room. I stood in the shadows near the floor-to-ceiling windows, gripping a glass of lukewarm tap water. My dress was a charcoal gray thing I had bought 5 years ago on clearance. It hung loosely on my frame, fraying slightly at the hem, surrounded by women in custom silk and diamonds that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. I looked like the help that had forgotten to leave. Tiffany Blake made sure everyone noticed the contrast. She was Dominic's executive assistant, a title that fooled absolutely no one in this room. She wore a dress that was more red satin than fabric, clinging to her body like a second skin. She stood so close to Dominic that they were practically one entity, her hand resting possessively on his bicep. She whispered something in his ear, and then her eyes darted across the room to lock onto mine. A smirk curled her painted lips, a look of pure, predatory triumph. Dominic caught her gaze, then mine. His smile vanished instantly. He excused himself from his admirers and marched toward me, his grip on my elbow tight enough to bruise. He steered me into his private study and slammed the heavy oak door, cutting off the noise of the party. The silence was sudden and deafening. He did not waste time with pleasantries. He grabbed a thick manila envelope from his desk and hurled it onto the glass coffee table. It slid across the surface and stopped inches from my hand. "I am a billionaire now, Valerie," he said, his voice cold and steady. "I run a company worth billions. Look at you. Just look at you." He gestured at my worn dress with disgusted hands, pacing the room like a caged tiger that had finally found the latch. "You are an anchor around my neck. I need a partner who fits the part. Someone who knows how to walk into a room and command it, not someone who hides in the corner like a frightened mouse. You are embarrassing me. You do not know how to spend money. You do not know how to live. You are just a peasant, Valerie, a simple, boring obstacle." I did not cry. I felt a strange calm settle over me, cold as the ice in the bucket outside. I looked at the papers, then up at his flushed face. "Are you sure you want to do this? Disregarding our agreement?" I asked quietly. Dominic threw his head back and laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound that lacked any real humor. "Agreement. You mean that little scrap of paper from college. You are pathetic. Stop making up nonsense to stay in this house. Get out. Get out of my sight." He pressed the intercom button and barked an order. 2 burly security guards appeared moments later. They did not touch me gently. They grabbed my arms and marched me to the service elevator, ignoring my silence. They shoved me out the back entrance into the biting wind of a New York winter night. The snow was falling in thick, wet clumps. I had no coat. My purse was still upstairs. I had nothing but the thin dress clinging to my skin, my phone in my hand, and an old iron key I had kept in my pocket for 10 years. The cold bit into my bones immediately. The roar of an engine cut through the wind. The garage gate opened, and a sleek, silver hypercar shot out. It was Dominic. I saw his silhouette behind the wheel, Tiffany laughing beside him. He swerved close to the curb, deliberately driving through a slushy puddle. Freezing, dirty water sprayed over me, soaking me from waist to toe. The taillights faded into the storm, taking 10 years of my life with them. I walked 3 blocks against the biting wind, ignoring the pain in my freezing feet. I passed 3 empty taxis and a subway station entrance. I was not going to leave a digital footprint on a ride-sharing app, and I certainly was not going to drag my family name through the mud of public transportation tonight. I stopped at a forgotten payphone on the corner of a desolate street. The metal handset was ice against my ear as I dropped a quarter into the slot and dialed a number that did not exist in any public directory. "Connect me," I whispered, my voice trembling from the cold. Then, I straightened my spine. I took a deep breath, pushing the shivering woman who had just been thrown out of a penthouse deep inside myself. When I spoke again, my tone was steel. "This is Valerie Sterling. Authorization code Alpha 7 Gold. Location is 34th and 10th. I am ready to come home." Less than 5 minutes later, a vehicle emerged from the snowfall like a phantom. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, painted a black so deep it seemed to absorb the streetlights. It bore diplomatic plates, a subtle signal of immunity and power that the new money uptown could never buy. The rear door opened, and a white-gloved hand extended an umbrella. An elderly man with posture as straight as a soldier's stepped out. "Miss Sterling," he said, bowing his head with genuine reverence. "We have been waiting a very long time for this call." I slid into the back seat. The interior smelled of aged leather and absolute silence. The chaotic noise of New York vanished the moment the heavy door latched shut. I rested my head against the seat as we began the long drive out to the Hamptons. We did not go to a beach house. We went to the Sterling estate, a sprawling manor of stone and ivy that had stood on the cliffs for over a century. My father, Arthur Sterling, was waiting in the library. The fire was roaring, casting long shadows against walls lined with first editions. He did not say "I told you so." He simply poured a glass of cognac and set it down on the mahogany table. I was the sole heiress to this empire. 10 years ago, I had walked away from it all. I had enrolled in a state university under a fake name, desperate to find someone who would love me for my mind and my heart, not for the billions attached to my surname. I found Dominic. I thought I had found a diamond in the rough. I had spent a decade polishing him, hiding my brilliance so his ego could shine, only to realize I had been polishing a piece of coal. I went to my old suite. The bathroom was larger than the first apartment Dominic and I had shared. I scrubbed my skin until it was red, washing away the slush of the city and the stench of Dominic's betrayal. When I emerged, I did not reach for jeans. I put on a robe of pure midnight blue silk. I brushed my hair back, revealing a face that was no longer soft. My eyes were hard, calculating. I walked to the wall behind my vanity and pressed a hidden panel. It slid open to reveal a safe. My fingers moved automatically over the dial. Inside, resting on a velvet cushion, was a single sheet of yellowed paper, carefully preserved in plastic. It was the napkin contract we had signed in a dorm room while eating cheap pizza. "Miss Sterling." I turned. Marcus Thorne stood in the doorway. He was the family's chief legal counsel, a man who could dismantle corporations with a single phone call. He held a thick black binder. "I have the forensic accounting on Veridian," Marcus said, placing the file on the desk. "Dominic has been creative with the numbers. If we move now, we can have him indicted for fraud within 48 hours. I ran my finger over the plastic edge of the contract. "No," I said softly. "Not yet. If we strike now, he can play the victim. He can say he made a mistake. I want him to climb higher. Marcus, I want him to believe he is untouchable. I want the fall to break him completely." Marcus nodded, a small, terrifying smile touching his lips. "As you wish. And the intellectual property rights." I picked up a gold fountain pen from the desk. The document Marcus placed before me was an activation order. It detailed the true authorship of the core algorithm that powered Viridian. Dominic thought he was a genius, but he was just a front man. I had written every line of that code while he slept. Execute it, I said, signing my name with a flourish. Activate the dormant protocols. Let him have his moment in the sun, because the eclipse is coming. From the reports Marcus laid on my desk each morning, it was clear that Dominic and Tiffany did not just move into the penthouse, they infested it. They treated the sudden influx of capital not as a business resource, but as a personal lottery win that would never run dry. The ink on the IPO documents was barely dry before the spending began, a grotesque display of new money trying desperately to look like old wealth. Tiffany led the charge. She didn't just shop, she hunted. She spent days raiding the boutiques on Madison Avenue, coming back with armfuls of orange Hermes boxes and jewelry cases that cost more than the college tuition of the staff she abused. By night, the penthouse transformed into a chaotic nightclub. The thumping bass vibrated through the floorboards of the neighbors below, who were quickly losing patience. Champagne flowed like water, spilled onto rugs that cost $50,000, ruined by people who didn't know the difference between silk and polyester. Dominic was no better. He was drunk on his own press coverage. The magazines called him the new tech genius, a title that made me laugh out loud in the quiet of my father's library. He bought 3 supercars in 1 week, parking them in a garage he rarely visited. He commissioned a yacht for $12 million, despite getting seasick on a ferry ride. He walked around the office with his chest puffed out, convinced he was a god among men. "I am untouchable," he was heard telling a reporter, slurring his words slightly. "Viridian is the future, and I am Viridian." His arrogance bled into the business. He began to purge the company of anyone who remembered me. The senior engineers, the quiet ones who had sat with me in the server room eating takeout while we debugged the core algorithm, were called into his office one by one. "We are pivoting," Dominic told the chief technical officer, a man who had been with us since the garage days. "I need fresh energy. You are too old. You don't get the vision. Get out." He replaced them with Tiffany's Friends Party promoters and brand ambassadors who couldn't write a line of code if their lives depended on it. When the inevitable glitches started appearing in the software, minor tremors before the earthquake, Dominic waved them off. "Just hire someone to patch it." He screamed at an intern when the server latency spiked. "Why is everyone so incompetent? It is just code. Fix it amidst this chaos." The legal courier delivered the official divorce papers. They contained specific clauses about the division of assets and, more importantly, the intellectual property disclosures. Dominic didn't even open the envelope. He saw my name on the return address, scoffed, and tossed the entire packet into the recycling bin. He was too busy planning his global expansion, signing leases in Tokyo and London based on projected profits that existed only in his imagination. Then came the final insult, the petty act that sealed his fate. Tiffany decided my presence in the penthouse was bad energy. She went through the storage unit where my personal items were kept, old clothes, my sketchbooks, and the oil paintings I had created during the few quiet weekends we had. Who would want this junk? Tiffany laughed, live streaming the purge to her followers. "It is so depressing. Sell it all. Whatever you can't sell, burn it." She listed my paintings on a second-hand auction site for pennies, mocking the amateur style. She didn't know that art was my sanctuary. She also didn't know that the buyer who snapped up every single item within 5 minutes was an agent acting on my behalf. I sat in the climate-controlled storage room of the Sterling estate, watching as my paintings were carefully unloaded from the delivery van. I ran my hand over the canvas of a seascape I had painted when we were first married. I had bought them back for less than $500. "They have no idea, do they?" Marcus asked, standing beside me. No, I replied, a cold smile touching my lips. They think they are selling trash. They don't realize they are stripping the insulation off a live wire. Let them spend, Marcus. Let them burn through every cent. When the bill comes due, they won't be able to afford the interest. The unraveling of Dominic's empire began on a Tuesday morning, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the Sovereign Private Bank. I watched the footage later, captured by the bank's security system, which Marcus had legally subpoenaed. Dominic marched in wearing a $5,000 suit, demanding a transfer of $50 million. It was the down payment for a ridiculous eco-resort in the Maldives that Tiffany had decided was her passion project for the week. He sat across from the branch manager, tapping his platinum watch impatiently. But the manager did not rush to authorize the transfer. Instead, he wiped sweat from his forehead and turned his monitor screen away. "Mr. Vance, I am afraid we cannot process this transaction," the manager said, his voice trembling slightly. "Your personal and corporate accounts have been frozen. There is a flag for a mandatory audit regarding the source of your liquid assets." Dominic stood up so fast his chair tipped over. "Frozen. Do you know who I am? I am Dominic Vance. I am worth billions. Release my money. Right now, it is out of my hands." "Sir," the order came from the Federal Compliance Office. "Until the audit is complete, you cannot access a single cent." Dominic lost his mind. He grabbed a heavy stapler from the desk and hurled it at the wall. "I will buy this bank and fire you. Do you hear me? I will destroy you." Security guards swarmed him within seconds. They grabbed him by the arms, dragging him toward the revolving doors like a common drunk. Outside, passers-by stopped to watch. Phones went up. The image of the great tech billionaire being thrown out of his own bank hit social media before he even reached his car. Back at the Viridian headquarters, the chaos was spreading like a virus. I sat in my father's study, monitoring the stock ticker. Viridian shares were twitching, dipping downward. Rumors had leaked onto hacker forums that the unbreakable encryption of Viridian's platform had a backdoor. It was a backdoor I had left there, of course, but the market didn't know that. They just smelled blood. Dominic stormed into his office, ignoring his terrified staff. His phone was ringing incessantly. It was the lead investor from the venture capital firm that had backed the IPO. "Dominic, we have a problem." The investor barked through the speakerphone. "Legal is looking at the prospectus again. The core algorithm. The IP registration. It doesn't list you as the creator. It lists an anonymous holding ID. Who owns the code?" Dominic laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. "I do. I wrote it in my dorm room. It is just a clerical error." "Do not listen to these rumors. I am the creator." He hung up and frantically pulled up the patent filing on his computer. For the first time, he actually read the metadata. Under author, it did not say Dominic Vance. It said Developer X. He stared at the screen, confusion clouding his face, but his arrogance wouldn't let him see the truth. He assumed it was a system glitch. Then his personal cell phone buzzed. It was Tiffany. "Dominic," she screamed, her voice shrill enough to peel paint. "I am at Chanel. They just cut up my card. The sales girl looked at me like I was trash. Fix this. You promised me I could have the alligator bag." "Shut up," Dominic roared back, slamming his fist on the desk. "Just shut up for 1 second. Tiffany, the bank is messing with my accounts. Go home. Stop spending money." "You stupid woman." It was the first time he had ever raised his voice at her. The silence on the other end was stunned, followed by the click of a disconnected call. Moments later, his secretary, eyes red from crying, crept into the office and placed a single envelope on his desk. It had no return address. A courier just brought this. "Mr. Vance." He said it was urgent. Dominic ripped it open. It was a formal cease and desist notification regarding the unauthorized commercial use of Intellectual Property Code 894B. The letter warned that continued use of the software would result in immediate legal action. Dominic crumpled the letter into a ball and threw it across the room. Competitors! He sneered to the empty room, his eyes wild. It is just dirty tricks from TechCorp. They are trying to scare me. They think they can break me. I am Dominic Vance. I am a king. He didn't think of me, not even for a second. In his mind, I was still the poor, pathetic woman shivering on the sidewalk. He had no idea that the king was standing on a trapdoor, and I had just oiled the hinges. Dominic was hemorrhaging money. In a desperate bid to understand why his assets were frozen, he hired a legal defense team that charged $2,000 an hour per attorney. They turned the Viridian conference room into a war room, boxes of documents stacked to the ceiling. I wasn't there, but I knew exactly what they would find. I had planted the seed 10 years ago, and today was the harvest. By the third hour, the lead attorney, a man named Sterling, no relation, simply a delicious irony, stopped pacing. He held up a single digitized document retrieved from the deepest archives of the patent office. His face was ash gray. Mr. Vance. We have found the source of the freeze, the attorney said, placing the paper in front of Dominic. It appears you do not own the core technology of Viridian. You never did. Dominic laughed, the sound brittle and bordering on hysterical. That is ridiculous. I built this company. I wrote the code according to this document, valid and notarized 10 years ago. You signed a conditional usage rights agreement, the attorney explained, his voice devoid of pity. It states clearly that the intellectual property, specifically the source code, belongs to an entity listed only as Developer X. You were granted a license to use it for commercial purposes, but that license has strict conditions. Dominic grabbed the paper, his hands shaking. The legal jargon swam before his eyes, but the clause highlighted in yellow was unmistakable. What is this? Dominic stammered, reading the text. It is a morality clause. Mr. Vance, the attorney replied. The license to use the code is valid only so long as the licensee maintains a monogamous marital relationship with his original spouse. In the event of infidelity or a unilateral divorce, filing without just cause, the usage rights are immediately revoked. The room spun around Dominic. The memory hit him like a physical blow. He was back in our cramped college dorm room, the air smelling of stale beer and cheap pepperoni pizza. He had been drunk, complaining about how hard the coding assignment was. I had finished it for him. I remembered sliding the paper across the desk, teasing him that if I was going to make him rich one day, he had to promise to be good to me. He had laughed, grabbed a pen, and scribbled his signature, thinking it was a joke. He thought he was signing a promise to do the dishes. He had actually signed away his future. Developer X, Dominic whispered, the blood draining from his face. It's Valerie. He scrambled for his phone, his fingers fumbling over the screen. He dialed my number, the one he had ignored for months. We're sorry. The number you have reached is no longer in service. The automated voice chirped cheerfully. He tried again, and again. Silence. Before he could process the magnitude of his mistake, the conference room door burst open. The chief technical officer rushed in, looking like he had seen a ghost. Dominic, the system, it's locking up. The CTO screamed. The source code is encrypting itself. We can't stop it. It's like the software is eating itself alive. Override it, Dominic shrieked, throwing his phone against the wall. Just turn it off and turn it back on. Do something. We can't. We don't have the decryption key. The author? The author initiates the lockdown remotely. Our clients are down. The banks, the hospitals, the logistics firms. Everyone using Viridian is dark. We are losing. Millions of data packets a second, Dominic sank into his chair. His phone on the desk beeped with a notification, then another, then a flood. Emails from legal departments of Fortune 500 companies. They weren't asking for support. They were filing lawsuits. They were demanding damages for breach of contract and service interruption. The numbers were astronomical. $1 billion, $2 billion. The lead attorney closed his briefcase with a snap. Mr. Vance, I must inform you that listing a company on the NASDAQ based on intellectual property you do not own constitutes massive commercial fraud, the lawyer said, stepping back from the table. You are not just looking at bankruptcy. You are looking at federal prison. I cannot represent you in a criminal fraud case. I resign. Dominic sat alone in the room as the lawyers filed out. The screens on the wall flickered red as server after server went offline. He wasn't a billionaire anymore. He was a fraudster who had sold a stolen car to the entire world, and the police were already on their way. Rats are always the first to abandon a sinking ship, and Tiffany Blake was no exception. With Dominic's accounts frozen and the corporate walls closing in, the facade of her devotion crumbled instantly. Through the surveillance software I had installed on the penthouse servers long before I left, I watched her frantic movements. She wasn't packing her bags. She was downloading client lists onto an encrypted hard drive. She was on the phone with Viridian's biggest rival, offering to sell the data for a fraction of its value just to secure her own lifeboat. Dominic walked in on her just as the file transfer reached 90%. He didn't ask questions. The rage that had been building inside him since the bank incident exploded. He grabbed her by the hair and dragged her toward the door, a violent reenactment of the night he had expelled me. "You are stealing from me!" Dominic screamed, his face purple with fury. "I gave you everything you are. Nothing without me." "You are broke, Dominic," Tiffany shrieked back, clawing at his hands. "You are going to jail. I am not going down with you. Let me go." He threw her out into the hallway, tossing her Hermes bags after her. The irony was poetic, but Dominic was too blind to see it. Alone and desperate, he decided to play his final card. He called a primetime news network and demanded an interview, claiming he had an exclusive story about the biggest fraud in tech history. I sat in the library with Marcus, watching the broadcast on the big screen. Dominic looked disheveled, his eyes wild, trying to project the image of a wounded genius. "Valerie Sterling is a con artist," Dominic told the interviewer, leaning into the camera. "She tricked me. She planted that contract 10 years ago. She has been waiting to destroy me because she is jealous. She is a toxic, manipulative gold digger who never contributed a cent to my success." He didn't stop there. He hired a shady crisis management firm to flood social media with fabricated stories about me. They painted me as a lazy housewife who was trying to steal a self-made man's fortune. For a few days, it worked. The internet is fickle, and the comments section filled with vitriol directed at me. "Why doesn't she speak up?" one pundit asked. "Her silence is very suspicious." "Let them talk," I told Marcus, sipping my tea. "Silence is louder than noise when the truth finally drops." Dominic mistook my silence for fear. Emboldened, he scraped together the last of his hidden cash reserves, a bundle of bills he kept in a safe behind a painting. He tried to meet with a high-ranking official from the Securities and Exchange Commission, hoping to bribe his way out of the asset freeze. "I can make you very comfortable," Dominic whispered to the official in a dimly lit bar, sliding an envelope across the table. "Just lift the freeze for 24 hours. That is all I need." The official stood up and threw the envelope back. "Mr. Vance, if you do not leave immediately, I will have you arrested for attempted bribery of a federal agent. The people investigating you are far above my pay grade." Dominic fled, terrified. In a last-ditch effort to find leverage, he drove 4 hours to the small, run-down town where he thought my parents lived. He planned to beg them, or perhaps threaten them, to get me to back off. He pulled up to the address I had given him 10 years ago. He found a rotting shack with boarded-up windows and a collapsed roof. We had never lived there. It was just an address I used for mail to maintain my cover. He grabbed a neighbor passing by. "Where are the Sterlings?" Dominic demanded, shaking the old man by the collar. "Where are they hiding?" "Sterlings," the man spat, pulling away. "Nobody has lived there for 20 years. Buddy, you are crazy." Dominic stood in the weeds, staring at the ruin. He realized then that he didn't know who I was. He had been married to a ghost by Friday. Viridian was delisted from the stock exchange. The shares were worthless paper. As Dominic stumbled back to his rental apartment, a process server was waiting for him. He handed Dominic a thick packet of documents. "Dominic Vance?" the man asked. "You are served. Federal lawsuit for copyright infringement, fraud, and defamation of character. Have a nice day." Dominic dropped the papers on the sidewalk. He looked up at the sky, but there was no mercy there, only the cold gray clouds of a storm that was just beginning. The press conference was held in the grand atrium of Sterling Tower, a location that screamed old money and unshakable power. Over 200 journalists from every major network in the world were packed into the hall, their cameras trained on the empty podium. They expected a spokesperson. Instead, they got me. I walked onto the stage wearing a white tailored suit that cost more than Dominic's entire wardrobe. I stood tall, my hair pulled back, my chin high. The murmur in the room died instantly as the large screen behind me lit up with the Sterling family crest. "Good morning," I said, my voice amplified clearly through the hall. "My name is Valerie Sterling. For the last 10 years, you knew me as Valerie Vance, the invisible wife of a man who claimed to build an empire alone. Today, I am here to correct the record." A collective gasp swept through the room. The flashbulbs erupted like a thunderstorm. I clicked a remote, and the screen behind me changed. It displayed a high-resolution scan of a yellowed, crinkled napkin. The handwriting was messy, but the signatures were clear, verified by 3 independent forensic handwriting experts. "This is the original contract," I explained, pointing to the screen. "Signed 10 years ago. It grants Dominic Vance usage rights and only usage rights to the code I wrote. It explicitly states that these rights are contingent upon his loyalty and moral conduct. He violated both." I clicked the remote again. The screen split into 2 columns. On the left, a stream of complex coding logs with timestamps ranging from midnight to 4 in the morning, authored by Developer X. On the right, Dominic's social media posts and credit card statements from the exact same times. "While I was writing the kernel for the Viridian system," I said, my voice hardening, "Dominic was checking into golf resorts in Florida or buying bottle service at clubs in Chelsea. He did not write the code. He barely knew how to launch the application." Marcus Thorne then stepped forward to the microphone. He looked grave. "We also submit into evidence the following security footage," Marcus announced. The video played. It was grainy but undeniable. It showed Dominic grabbing me, shoving me toward the door and throwing me into the snow. His voice, shouting insults about my poverty and uselessness, echoed through the silent hall. I saw reporters in the front row cover their mouths in shock. The image of the genius billionaire shattered, replaced by a picture of a cruel, abusive bully. "I am suing for full restitution," I continued, taking back the podium. "However, I do not need his money. I am a Sterling. Therefore, every single cent recovered from Dominic Vance will be donated to the Phoenix Fund, a charity dedicated to helping women rebuild their lives after escaping abusive partners." The reaction was instantaneous, online. The tide didn't just turn, it crashed over Dominic like a tsunami. Hashtag boycott Viridian became the #1 trending topic worldwide within minutes. Major banks released statements announcing the immediate seizure of Dominic's mortgaged properties. His sponsors dropped him in real time. Meanwhile, at JFK International Airport, Tiffany Blake was trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. She was carrying a hard drive containing what she thought was the client database. She didn't know that I had baited those files. As soon as she tried to access them to verify the sale, a silent alarm pinged the FBI. News cameras caught the moment federal agents surrounded her at the gate. She was screaming, looking disheveled and terrified. It wasn't me. It was Dominic. He made me do it. Please, she shrieked as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Dominic sat in a cramped, furnished rental apartment in Queens, watching the broadcast on a small, fuzzy television. He sat on a stained beige sofa, surrounded by empty takeout containers. He watched me on the screen, radiant and powerful, commanding the attention of the world. He looked down at his own hands, empty and trembling. She was the sterling heiress the whole time. He whispered to the empty room, his voice cracking. I threw away a diamond to pick up a rock. He reached for the remote to turn it off, but his hand froze. He couldn't stop watching. He was witnessing his own funeral, and I was the one delivering the eulogy. Desperation makes men do stupid things, but Dominic was already stupid. Desperation just made him dangerous. He had pawned his watch to buy a serial number scrubbed pistol from a contact in the Bronx. He spent 3 days lurking around the perimeter of the Sterling Tower, wearing a stolen janitor's uniform and a cap pulled low over his eyes. He blended in with the invisible workforce he used to despise. He thought he was being clever, hunting his prey. He did not realize that in the world of the Sterlings, the prey is often the trap. My head of security had identified him on the first day. Do you want us to intercept? He had asked. No, I replied, checking the load in my own hidden taser. Let him make his move. I want the world to see him for what he really is. On Thursday evening, I visited a pop-up art installation in Soho. It was a calculated risk. I instructed my detail to hang back, leaving a 20-foot gap between me and the car. It was the opening Dominic needed. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, a figure lunged from the shadows of a dumpster, an arm locked around my throat, the cold, hard barrel of a gun pressed against my temple. Don't move, Dominic screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. Get in the alley now. He dragged me into the darkness between 2 brick buildings. The smell of garbage and stale urine was overwhelming, but the stench of Dominic's fear was stronger. He shoved me against the damp wall, his hand shaking so badly the gun rattled against my skull. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a crumpled document, a transfer of ownership form he had drafted himself. Sign it, he yelled, spittle flying from his mouth. Sign the rights back to me or I swear to God, I will blow your brains out. I did not tremble, I did not beg, I simply straightened my jacket and looked him in the eye. You really are a fool, Dominic, I said, my voice steady and calm. Do you think I didn't foresee this? Do you think I didn't prepare for the moment you snapped, "Shut up!" he shrieked, pressing the gun harder. Just sign it. I need my life back. There is no life to give back, I told him. And here is a piece of information you missed. My will is already notarized. If I die, for any reason, the intellectual property rights transfer irrevocably to the Phoenix Fund. You will never see a single penny. Killing me just ensures your poverty is permanent. Dominic froze. His eyes widened, darting back and forth as the logic penetrated his panic. He realized he was checkmated. The gun lowered slightly, then raised again in a spasm of pure, impotent rage. Then I will just kill you for fun, he roared, his finger tightening on the trigger. He never got the chance. 2 shadows dropped from the fire escape above. At the same moment, the homeless man sleeping under the cardboard boxes to our left sprang up. In less than a second, Dominic's arm was twisted behind his back with a sickening crunch. The gun clattered to the pavement. He was slammed face first into the concrete, a knee pressed into his spine. "Secure!" one of the guards shouted, reaching for his baton. "Wait!" I commanded. The guard froze, his baton inches from Dominic's skull. "Do not kill him!" I said, stepping over the gun on the ground. "That is too easy. Let the law have him." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder every second. Within minutes, the alley was bathed in the flashing red and blue lights of the police. They hauled Dominic up. His nose was broken, blood streaming down his face, mixing with the grime of the alley. As they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, a news van pulled up. The cameraman sprinted over, catching the live feed. Dominic saw the lens and lunged at the window, his face pressed against the glass, distorted and manic. "Valerie," he screamed, the sound captured on televisions across the city. "Valerie, you ruined me. You are the devil, Valerie." I stood on the sidewalk, untouched and unruffled, watching the car pull away. He was finally where he belonged, in the back of a cage, screaming at a world that had stopped listening. The judge denied bail less than 2 hours after Dominic's arrest, citing the armed kidnapping attempt and the undeniable flight risk of a man who had tried to flee his own life. They did not send him to a white-collar facility with tennis courts and manicured lawns. They sent him to the Metropolitan Detention Center, a concrete box filled with the kind of men Dominic used to cross the street to avoid. He was stripped of his Italian suit and forced into a bright orange jumpsuit that smelled of industrial detergent and other men's sweat. The humiliation was immediate and relentless. The story of the idiot CEO who dumped a billionaire heiress for a broke secretary had circulated through the cell block before he even arrived. "Hey, genius!" A tattoo-covered inmate shouted from the top bunk as Dominic was shoved into his cell. "Is it true you threw away the winning lottery ticket for a scratch-off that was already used? You are the dumbest man I have ever met." Dominic huddled in the corner, covering his ears, but he could not shut out the laughter. It echoed off the cinder blocks, a constant reminder of his stupidity. By the third day, his arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a pathetic desperation. His court-appointed public defender, a tired woman with too many cases and 0 patience, sat across from him in the visitation room. She did not open her briefcase. "Look, Mr. Vance," she said, rubbing her temples. "They have you on video. They have the weapon. They have the victim's testimony. If you go to trial, you are looking at 20 years minimum. Plead guilty. Take the deal for 15. It is the only card you have left to play." Dominic wept. He demanded to see me. He claimed that if he could just talk to me, he could fix it. He told his lawyer that we had a bond that the law could not understand. Against my better judgment, or perhaps because I wanted closure to be absolute. I agreed, but I refused to visit the prison. I would only speak to him via a secure video link. I took the call in my father's study, sipping a cup of Earl Grey tea. The screen flickered to life, revealing Dominic. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. His head was shaved, his face was bruised from the arrest, and his eyes were bloodshot and hollow. When he saw me, he pressed his face against the plexiglass of the camera. "Valerie," he choked out, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Oh, God, Valerie, look at me. Look what they did to me. You have to help me. Please, I am begging you." I looked at him, searching for any spark of the man I once loved. I found nothing. "You have a lawyer, Dominic," I said, my voice flat. "I don't want a lawyer. I want my wife," he screamed, then lowered his voice to a trembling whisper. It was Tiffany. She twisted my mind. She made me think I was someone else. I never stopped loving you, Val. I was just confused. I was drunk on the success. I can change. I swear, I will sign anything. Just get me out of here. He was still trying to manipulate me. He still thought he was the protagonist of the story. Stop it, I cut him off. You do not love me. You do not love Tiffany. You only love yourself, Dominic. And right now, that self is worthless. He recoiled as if I had slapped him. What? What do you mean I mean that the divorce is final? I said, picking up a document from my desk. The court granted an emergency judgment this morning. Because of your fraud and the damages you caused to the Sterling name, the judge awarded me 100% of the marital assets, the penthouse, the cars, the accounts. They are all mine. You have nothing. Dominic stared at the camera, his mouth open, struggling to breathe. But the company. My shares Viridian is gone, I told him. But the debts remain. And here is the part your lawyer might not have mentioned yet. Since you filed fraudulent tax returns to hide your spending, the IRS has audited you personally. You owe $12 million in back taxes and penalties. Since you have no assets, you will be working in the prison laundry for the next 4,000 years to pay it off. No, he whimpered, sliding down the wall of his booth until only his eyes were visible. No, please, don't leave me like this. Goodbye, Dominic, I said. I pressed the button. The connection severed. The screen went black. In his cold, gray cell, Dominic Vance stared at the blank monitor. The silence of the room was heavy, crushing him with the weight of a life he had built on lies and destroyed with his own hands. He was finally, truly alone. The day of the sentencing was crisp and bright, the kind of day that felt like a new beginning. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan was surrounded by media vans, their satellite dishes pointed at the sky like hungry mouths waiting to be fed. I walked up the marble steps wearing a suit of midnight blue, the color of the deep ocean, tailored to perfection. I did not hide behind sunglasses. I wanted the world to see my eyes. I wanted them to see that I was not a victim, but a victor. Inside, the courtroom was packed. A hush fell over the gallery as I took my seat in the front row. When the bailiff announced the arrival of the defendants, the air in the room grew heavy. Dominic shuffled in, his ankles shackled, wearing a prison uniform that hung loosely on his frame. He looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 days. His skin was sallow, his hair thinning and gray. He kept his head down, refusing to look at the gallery, refusing to look at me. Tiffany Blake was led in beside him. She was no longer the arrogant woman who had sneered at my clothes. She was trembling, her makeup gone, her face puffy from crying. The judge, a stern woman with eyes that missed nothing, read the verdict with a voice like a gavel strike. Dominic Vance, for the crimes of wire fraud, securities fraud, and aggravated assault. This court sentences you to 15 years in a federal penitentiary with no possibility of parole for the first 10 years. Dominic flinched as if he had been struck physically. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Tiffany Blake, the judge continued, shifting her gaze. For the theft of trade secrets and conspiracy to commit fraud, you are sentenced to 5 years in a minimum security facility. Tiffany let out a sob, collapsing into her chair until her lawyer pulled her up. The gavel banged, sealing their fates in the history books of New York high society crimes. As the marshals moved to shackle Dominic's hands behind his back, he suddenly stopped. He lifted his head and scanned the room until his eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, the room was silent. He looked at me with a mixture of confusion and profound loss. Valerie, he rasped, his voice cracking. Why didn't you tell me you were rich? Why did you hide it? The marshals tugged at his arms, but I stood up. I walked to the wooden railing that separated us. I looked down at the man who had once promised to love me forever, the man who had thrown me into the snow like garbage. Because, I whispered, my voice low but clear enough for him to hear every syllable. I wanted a husband who loved me when I had nothing, not a dog wagging its tail at a pile of money. The color drained from his face completely. His knees buckled, and he slumped forward, a dead weight in the arms of the officers. They dragged him out through the side door, his feet trailing on the floor, the sound of his sobbing fading into the corridor. The doors swung shut, cutting him out of my life forever. I turned and walked up the center aisle. The doors to the outside world opened, and the sunlight hit me, warm and blinding. Marcus Thorne was waiting at the curb, holding open the door of the Rolls-Royce. He nodded at me, a silent gesture of respect and finality. I slid into the back seat and pulled out my phone. I opened my contacts list and scrolled to the entry labeled Dominic. I did not hesitate. I pressed delete. The name vanished, leaving only empty space. I dialed my executive assistant. It is done. I said, initiate the rebranding protocols immediately. The name Viridian is dead. From this moment on, the company is Phoenix Tech. Tear down the old signs. We are rising from the ashes. I hung up and looked out the window as the car merged into the traffic of the city. I had a meeting in an hour to sign the final acquisition papers, erasing the last legal footprint of Dominic Vance from my empire. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the girl who had hidden in a dorm room, afraid of her own shadow. She was Valerie Sterling, and she had a world to run. The past was a closed book, and I had just written the final period. Thank you so much for listening to my story and following this journey of justice and retribution. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Valerie's decision. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.